or the idea of the meat, can an Orthodox Jewish girl become bar mitzvah? Can an Orthodox Jewish person, once bar mitzvah, go to the Torah and do different honors? Then you have the conservative, where when I was in the synagogue, bar mitzvah was kind of new in the 70s. So we could only read from the temple I belonged to, from the Haftorah on a Saturday. And then a reform, I don't remember, because I once had a girlfriend who belonged to a Reform synagogue. So have the rulings changed through the times? Can an Orthodox child at a synagogue in Houston become, a girl particularly, become bar mitzvah, or is that still reserved for boys only? You see where I'm going?
Yes, I hear the question. So I'm going to say my answer, and I think I'll say it in a way that Rabbi Dan will agree.
Right. And
that's my goal. So like this.
So what you believe
factionalism in Judaism is not really new. We've had, if you look at the books of Josephus, we talked about 2,000 years ago, and the Talmud talks about this. There were different groups as well. If you've heard the Pharisees or the Sadducees, these were groups that had different opinions as to what is true, what does Judaism believe, etc. Now, it kind of died, and it had a kind of little rebirth during the Karaite movement in the 9th century, whatever. That still exists a little bit today, but it's not really much of a movement. But if you looked at the Jewish world 500 years ago, there were really no factions. There was just Judaism and mainstream Judaism, what Judaism had always believed, traditional Judaism. And there were individuals that weren't practicing, and there were individuals that had gone astray from faith, of course. But there wasn't any movement that had any other opinion other than what everyone else believed. In the early 19th century, I think, out of the 2,000 individual centuries of, from the year 2000, from the year 0 to the year 2000, I think the 19th century was the worst century for Jewish continuity out of them all. How so? So there's obviously the geopolitical reasons. The status of the Jew was changing all over Europe. They were emancipated. They were allowed to, come in contact with the world, allowed to own property, allowed to become citizens, allowed to vote, etc. The restrictions that were placed upon the Jews, the marginalizations, economic and social and academic marginalizations that were placed on the Jews in Europe for 1,000 years were eased, first in France and eventually everywhere else. And it was a time where a lot of Jews said, listen, we're out. We want to be part of the greater world. We don't want to be living in a little shtetl, in a little ghetto, in a little pale settlement. We want to maximize our opportunities. And unfortunately, a lot of Jews abandoned Judaism. In the 19th century, we had a quarter of the Jewish people, a quarter million Jews converted to Christianity. So that's terrible. Like, you have Jews that, because they were provided with an opportunity, they abandoned their Judaism. So besides for that, there were other movements that were developed in Germany. The Reform movement. Now, the Reform movement, it's important to note, is a very dynamic movement. It's very adaptive. I talked to the rabbi earlier about
anything goes. As long as you're still a Jew, you
well,
believe in one God.
Yeah,
you
but
can
no,
change
but
the rules
but
of the Orthodox, right?
no. I think on a more big picture, what Reform actually believes has changed. And we talked earlier about the Pittsburgh Platform. You can read it online. In 1885, the Reform movement officially was they had a convention in Pittsburgh, and they officially kind of crystallized what they believe. And one of the big things was that they don't believe in going back to Israel anymore.
Every 50 years or so, they do a new platform.
Yeah, so it's so what reform was or reform is today is very different. So that's why it's important.
That's why you said adaptive.
Yeah. So in 1885 they said we're not. So they pretty much axed all ritualistic Judaism. It got rid of any mention of Jerusalem or Israel or the temple or rebuilding or like Hebrew all that. Use of Hebrew from prayer was all axed from the liturgy. And that changed in Columbus. Like we said, in Columbus in 1937 was where the they changed and said, now they do adopt Zionism. So Zionism, originally their reform were very anti-Zionist, but that changed. And we know there's a Pittsburgh platform of 1997 where if you read it, it's all about Torah, and it's all about tradition, and it's all about learning. So it does change.
They went back to my hometown to...
Yeah, so if you take these two documents, and I just showed it them without the heading, you say, these are two documents describing what a group believes, you can't believe it they're from the same group, because it's really not the same group. One of them is kind of like really abandoning Judaism, traditional Judaism. One of them is embracing it. That being said, and the conservative movement began as a result, as the backlash of the Pittsburgh platform. It began in 1886 because they said that the reform was selling out, so to speak, of traditional Judaism, and the conservative movement was going to conserve that. So it was going to be kind of like halfway between what they viewed as being too radical in the Reform and what being maybe too traditional in the Orthodox, and it was kind of was going to straddle the line of observance of halacha yet embracing of a modern world.
But still with the yearning of going to Israel and settling in Israel and...
Yeah, well, the conservative Judaism, I think of this everyone would agree, they have the hardest time kind of straddling both sides of every issue. If you ask a conservative rabbi, say, listen, do you have to believe in God? He'll say, I don't know what he'll say. He'll say probably yes, but is the Torah for sure true? He'll say, well, even if it isn't, it doesn't matter. That's kind of the line. It's like, even if the Torah isn't true, you kind of have to observe it from a more like a custom or traditional perspective. So it's kind of like you have to observe the Torah even though it may not be true. That means it's a very hard line that they have to walk.
And the way the Torah is
And
given,
yes, and
the word and that
that's
kind of
right.
thing,
That's
that
right.
varies between the three.
I don't know about that. I think that the bridge. This is one of my big pet peeves. The bridge is kind of narrowing. I think that if you look at today, I once made this argument that the core beliefs of most Jews that are practicing, whichever faction they fall into, is that they believe in God, they believe in Torah, they believe in the Jewish mission, they believe in Israel. It means, from a philosophical perspective, I really think that there is almost no substantive difference between the different groups. I think the difference is going to be only in practice. Only in practice.
They're not like who says the word of God, like I...
Yeah, you ask most, you have some,
you
have
God,
some.
And some people was inspired by God, and then other people say
A lot of
the
that-
Torah was written by you and me, done,
A lot of that is semantics, just how you present it. A lot of that is also some rabbis want to make a big splash by saying that. They're saying, oh, the whole Exodus story was nonsense. It's a lot of theatrics. But the general population, generally, you walk into Beth Yeshurun, pull an average guy, and you say, well, do you believe in God? Yes. Do you believe in Torah? Yes. Do you believe in Israel? Yes. Do you believe in the mission? Yes. Most of them will. So what's the difference? The difference is more about practice. The difference is narrow.
Can I add something to?
Yes.
So,
Sorry. I
okay,
apologize.
so let me just crystallize this piece, and we'll get to it. Can you hold on to it for a second, John? Basically, and I'm going to do a real brief. Basically, each body has sort of a political structure that makes those kinds of decisions and rulings, like the example you mentioned. Do you drive on Shabbat in order to go to the synagogue? So reform is not anything goes. Reform is practicing Reform Judaism is like Rabbi said, is a particular way of practicing, and it involves a different level of individual choice than following the halacha. Conservative is meant to be a halachic movement, but they have a very an intricate way of deciding, is this halachically correct or is it not, and how individuals within each of these movements practice can vary. So what we really try and do here is make anybody who wants to practice in any way feel as comfortable as possible.
But what about my question?
Yeah, but so I want to let John get to his thing, but it's that's a whole course.
Right.
It's a whole course.
Yeah, but I think, to add to your point, I think that that's true. I think, but least true amongst the Orthodox. They're least organized, probably, and they're least means
Well,
because the Orthodox really is not really a new movement. You wouldn't argue that. It's kind of like just the traditional mainstream Judaism the way it was.
And there are more things that are set, like the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah, right. So
Right.
so it's really not. It's not the only adaptation to Orthodox, or I hate the term Orthodox. It sounds so backward. But traditional Jewry, Orthodox Jewry, is going to admit the only adaptation is just how to view new technology with old principles. The principles don't change. The
Right.
principles are immutable.
Yeah.
Like the principles of the Talmud, even though they were 1,500 years ago, well, they're still today. Right? The principles themselves don't change. The realities that we're going to use as a backdrop for these principles, well, that will change. We don't have. No one owns cattle anymore. We have cars. But the laws that were told in regards to cattle, they have principles. Those principles are applicable to today's modern technology.
So a quick example that's been in the Orthodox community is about organ donations, and that the traditional view was always you don't desecrate a body in any way. And there are some Orthodox communities that say, in order to save a life, because back in those days we didn't have the technology of being able to take a heart or a liver from one person to another. Mm-hmm. So there are some Orthodox rabbis who will say that this principle of pikuach nefesh, saving a life, is important enough to override this other question about the prohibition of desecrating a body.
Right, but the principles themselves are unchanged.
Exactly. The principle is life is sacred. So that was one of the reasons.
Right, and the principles are all in the Talmud.
Yeah.
Yeah, the principles of pikuach nefesh and of not desecrating a life are all set in stone already. They're immutable. They're not going to change. And that means that there's no. I'll get to you in a second, John. That means that there's no adaptation. It means even things that are not popular. Yeah, even things that are not popular. If they're in the Torah, we don't believe in the scalpel. We don't believe in taking out sections of the Torah, even the ones that are not very politically favorable today, like homosexuality. The Torah is very clear about homosexuality, and as uncomfortable as we are today, well, that's what we have. It's the Torah, and the second you erase one line of the Torah, you erase the entire Torah itself. Because who are we to decide which parts of the Torah we want to keep, and which parts are because that they're not favorable today? We want to just discard them. Yes, John. Ooh.
You said in the Pittsburgh platform they said don't go back to Israel?
I don't. We could get the exact. It's very short.
It was about loyalty to the Reform movement. When it began, was all about loyalty to where you live. So you pray in the language where in Germany you pray in German, America you pray in English. So loyalty to a country in the Middle East was not part of what we're talking 1870 something, whatever. And that's what evolved over time. Where is it right? So it said that Israel is not your home. Be a Jew wherever you are, and be part of American Jewry in America, German Jewry in Germany, etc.
We are.
I think
Yeah, but I think it's more than that. I think it was a departure of viewing Judaism as a nation. So that part of the line is we are no longer a nation.
Right. There was about a ethical monotheism. It was about
But the Reform movement has totally changed its tone upon. Yeah.
Resolved, right?
Yeah.
What is
Yes, Joe.